We're back with a much requested, potentially long overdue update to my core mod list. I was holding off on putting this video out, primarily because I was hoping to see updates to two major performance mods that were a cornerstone of my 1.5 setup, Performance Fish and Rocket Man. As it currently stands, it's been over half a year with no sign of any update to them. So I'm going to bite the bullet and assume that we're unlikely to see movement on those pages anytime soon, if ever again. With that in mind, if you're watching this video and they are available and working now, make sure to include them in your game. There's a reason that I was holding out for them. First and foremost, this video is going to be split up into sections. We'll be covering RimSort first, how to install it, why you should use it, so if you're already locked and loaded with that, you can hop straight to this timestamp to get the actual mods. In terms of mods, we've got frameworks, quality of life editions that are small and large, UI and hotbar changes, visual changes, content mods, again small then large, tweaks, both small and large, and finally content heavy mods that are not part of the core mod pack but do come highly recommended on an either or basis, or as part of a more specific theme to your gameplay. All of the core mods will be listed in a workshop collection down in the video description, and the parts that are recommendations, not core mods, will have their own separate link. As with every time I share a workshop collection on this channel, read what the mods do before you hit subscribe. There are parts included in the non-core list that will not play nicely together. It isn't designed to be fire and forget. These are optional inclusions that I personally recommend. The core list, however, is pretty much bulletproof across all kinds of playthroughs, in my experience at least. Just make sure you've got the relevant frameworks or DLC if they're required, and that you're sorting your mod list before you hit play. So, RimSort. Why do I recommend it over Rimpy? It has more functionality, a more active team working on it, and it will make things considerably easier once you have the basics for it set up. So whilst, yes, it is more involved to install and initially configure, that's going to pay off significantly more in the long run, and you'll encounter far fewer problems when using it. Firstly, we're going to need to download RimSort itself. Make sure that you're grabbing the right version for your operating system. I've seen comments in my old performance video that mention people being unable to get it working because they were grabbing the first file on the release list, which is made for Darwin, so intended to be used by Macs or iOS, rather than looking a little further down and grabbing the Windows installer, or the Fedora or Ubuntu, whatever works for your system. It's up to you if you want to download it as an MSI to install the program using a wizard, or grab the straight up zip file that you can extract and then launch the exe directly. Upon launching RimSort, we need to open the settings and make sure it has the correct paths to find the files it needs to work with. I've got my paths visible on screen now. These will work if you're using a Steam copy of Rimworld with the default install directories. You just need to change things like the username in the config location to match your own. The auto detect button usually does a pretty good job of sorting all of this out for you anyway. Then we're going to need to add some databases. These are what allow RimSort to actually sort your mods automatically, otherwise it runs off extremely basic rules like alphabetical sorting, which isn't really going to work if mods needed to be loaded after something else, like a framework, or put at the very end of the list to function correctly. If you've got Git software installed on your computer, these can be set to update automatically by simply providing the path and hitting the download button in the GitHub option. If you don't want to go the route of installing Git software on your machine, you can follow the links shown for the community rules and the Steam Workshop databases and download them manually. Then you use the local file option to find those downloads. Very broadly speaking, unless you're installing dozens of new mods every week, you shouldn't need to update these rules that often. But if you are noticing that things seem to be automatically sorting in very strange ways, try running an update here first to see if that improves it. You can also set an expiry time if you want them to update on a fixed interval, but I keep mine set to 0 and just manually download them whenever it's needed. For additional databases, I highly recommend linking to the Use This Instead database. This will massively benefit from being kept up to date. What use this instead does is inform you if there is a better mod available for something that you are already using, providing you the option of swapping over to it at the click of a button. This could be something like an abandoned mod that's been picked up by another user on the workshop, a forked version that is considered to be more stable, or a complete alternative that's widely regarded to be superior to the mod that it's replacing. An example of that is simple camera settings rather than using Camera Plus. Now I'll slowly open my pages for the sorting options, DB Builder, Steam CMD, TODS, and Advanced to show you the settings that I run with. I've had zero issues with this setup so far, and you don't really need to mess about with the majority of these other options. The one thing you definitely do want enabled though is the option for check for mod updates on refresh. The Steam client is god awful for keeping your workshop mods up to date. Even validating the game files will often fail to have it realise that it's running outdated mod versions. This setting will check all of your mods against the latest version available on the workshop and forcefully unsubscribe and resubscribe to them for you, if you tell it to. That way you're always going to be running the most up-to-date content, and it'll help massively with things like newly released mods that require a framework. Only Steam hasn't updated the framework for you, so you end up thinking that lovely shiny new mod isn't functioning as intended, because it's trying to work with a framework reference that doesn't actually exist in your outdated version. Outside of that, you can also use RimSort to add Git mods rather than mods from the Steam workshop. I use this for a couple of things like Frozen Snow Fox tweaks and Performance Fish, which is sadly not back yet. We've also got a button to optimize textures, extremely handy if you have a very set mod list that you don't mess around with that often, as adding and removing things requires it to be re-optimized each time. You can also save and load different mod lists, so it saves you needing to manually change it every time. It's great if you play with a major content overhaul such as CE or Medieval and don't want to commit to that being the only way you get to play the game for the next few days or weeks. As well as that, you can export and import mod lists to Rentry.co, which I'll be doing for the mod lists in this video, as well as making a Steam Workshop collection. So if you do decide to use RimSort, you can simply import the list that way instead, and it'll be good to go. So that's RimSort done. Let's get some mods installed to actually play with. Or rather, let's make sure we've got all of our framework in place for everything to play nicely. This mod pack uses Harmony, Adaptive Storage Framework, XML extensions, HugsLib, Vanilla Expanded Framework, and the Processor Framework. Whilst it isn't strictly a framework itself, I'm also going to mention Prepatcher here. It's a mod that has extremely strict rules about where it wants to be placed for loading. It should always be at the very top of your load order, even above Harmony. You'll know when you've got your sorting options set up correctly because it'll put it at the very top of your active mod list. There's not really a lot else to talk about with frameworks, just that you want to make sure that if you're using any other mods not mentioned in this video for your own playthrough, you're always installing any required mods listed on their workshop page and checking those required mods for any of their own requirements. Sometimes it goes a layer or two deep. On to the smaller quality of life stuff now. The majority of these add or change just a single feature of the game to make your life that little bit easier. Automatic stump chopping is going to flag a wood cutting order whenever you fell a tree, grabbing you a little bit of extra wood each time and saving you needing to manually redrag the order after clearing a forest. Auto strip on haul is useful for grabbing gear to smelt after a large combat, earning you a lot of passive income from raids. It's also quite a customizable tool, allowing you to decide how many pieces of gear are dropped by it and when the action occurs. If you're rolling with the old cannibal meme, this is going to massively help in avoiding cluttering up your butcher table with exploding tainted clothing whenever it comes time to process your meals. Auto extract genes is a nice addition if you're playing with biotech, meaning you don't need to manually track the cooldowns of the gene extraction process across your entire colony and prison. If someone is safe for an extraction procedure, they'll be carried to an available pod when possible. Automatic Night Owl will stop you forgetting to change the schedules of nocturnal colonists by automatically flagging them with a more suitable timetable. It can also be set to work for xenotypes that prefer darkness or are susceptible to sunlight too. Better workbench management is a godsend once you've got into the stage of the game that requires a lot more crafting, allowing you to more easily move, rename, copy, paste and tweak any crafting builds on your benches as needed. I've used this for so long that I'd almost forgotten how clunky the vanilla build system is. This makes everything from cooking, clothing, armor, weaponry and even simple stone bricks infinitely less time consuming to manage. Better info card is something that allows you to resize, highlight, move and open multiple info cards at once, making it much easier to compare stats or to keep important information on your screen without blocking your view. Bionic icons helps in identifying at a glance what organs or prosthetics you have in your stockpile, rather than needing to manually click through piles of the same coloured box to try and find what you're actually looking for. Custom prisoner interactions will automate procedures for you when you capture a new prisoner, allowing you to decide the order of operation too. I like to set it to reduce resistance, then convert, and finally recruit. It helps avoiding prisoners needing to be reconverted because they had a crisis of faith while stuck in prison waiting for their resistance to break down. Designator shapes is still a really solid addition to your game, working on top of the shapes mechanic that came in with 1.6 but giving you more options, like the paint bucket tool and generally drawing more aesthetically pleasing circles or ovals. Disable automatically select travel supplies is more of a personal preference of mine. It allows you to set up completely bare caravans by default, rather than it automatically adding medicine and food to it. It just gives you that little bit more control. Drag select is extremely handy for traders and any assignments, allowing one click to do the work of dozens by simply pressing and running your mouse along an entire list. Food poisoning stack fix is something that many players don't even realise they want. By default, if a single tainted meal is added to a stack of safe meals, the entire batch becomes tainted, leading to food poisoning spirals with no clear indication of what stack of meals is the culprit. This removes the spread of tainted food, so people may still get sick, but it's unlikely to impact the entire colony at once. Ground Targeter is a must-have if you want to use explosives of any kind. Simply hold down shift whilst aiming and you're now able to blow up a general area rather than needing to target something specific. Map Preview will let you better visualize the target that you're traveling to or planning to settle on. Great if you have an idea in mind for the type of base you'd like to build, that would have been spoiled if you landed and realized the thin river goes right through the middle of your map rather than curving to the side. Replace stuff is going to stop your builders, most of the time anyway, from dropping an entire room on their head. The replacement feature that came with 1.6 is nice, but it often has disastrous consequences if you attempt to replace an entire room in one go. This makes it generally safer for your colonists when you want to progress from wooden structures to stone or metal. Self-dyeing will let your colony take care of their own colours rather than needing manual input every time you want to dye a piece of equipment. It actually allows the ideology mechanic of dyeing to be viable rather than a pain in the arse to use. Simple camera settings gives you a greater degree of zoom in, zoom out, nicer panning, the option of following colonists by hitting a hotkey, and all of the options you could ever need to tweak it to your personal preference, which is just as well, because the first thing I always do is disable zoom to cursor. Gives me motion sickness. Smart Speed unlocks the Super Speed button that's normally only used in dev mode, now for regular play, so you can get through those quiet nights even faster. Just be aware that this won't be able to magically make your game perform better. If you're in a late game colony with dozens of people, animals and jobs, your performance is still going to be limited by what's known as tick rate. The game speed can't exceed that, it'll simply go as fast as it's able to manage. Smarter construction will stop your builders from boxing themselves into a corner by ensuring that they always construct with a viable path available. No more needing to deconstruct a wall because some idiot built themselves a marble coffin. Smarter deconstruction and mining does the flip side of smarter construction. Colonists will no longer remove walls or mountain blocks if it would result in them being splattered, so you don't need to babysit quite as much when doing a large excavation project. Smarter Visitors is extremely useful as it'll stop visiting factions on your map blindly wandering into threats when they want to leave, as well as having them ensure that their group is healthy enough to depart before making their way to the edge of the map as well. What's That mod will get exponentially more beneficial as you grow your mod list. If you see something that you really like or dislike, this shows you the source of the content on the information card. It helps you to prune your mod list if necessary, or gives you a reason to check out that creator's workshop page and see what other cool stuff they might have made. Development mode hotkey is something I've included here because I use it when making my videos all the time. This allows you to set up a simple hotkey to instantly turn on and off dev mode without needing to open the options menu, hit the toggle and then close it again. It's probably overkill for most players, but it's handy for those of you that might play a bit more creatively or want to throw a challenge at your colony if the storyteller's gone AFK. That just leaves us with a few larger quality of life mods now. Compositable loadouts is something that personally I love, but I'm fully aware it's a Marmite mod. You're either going to love this or hate it. I've got a video on the channel explaining in detail how it works, as it utilises a priority system for gearing colonists rather than the simple yes/no on the apparel policy. It gives you great control of what your colonists should be wearing and even allows you to set up states such as combat, work, social, with gear that buffs stats related to those set to be equipped. It does work with CE too. You just need to use compositable loadouts for everything except ammo, then set up a generic CE loadout system that uses the ad hoc ammo setting. Again, it can be pretty involved. Smart farming is something I still like to use despite its inclusion in Regrowth 2. I simply prefer the implementation on the standalone smart farming mod. This allows you to set priorities for your fields in a similar fashion to stockpiles, so certain crops will be planted or harvested before others, as well as letting you turn off planting for a season, force planting, or use the smart setting that works around the growth time of the plants so it won't waste time sowing seeds if they wouldn't reach a level of maturity before the weather's going to turn and get too cold. Very handy indeed. Use this instead is something that, if you followed my advice on RimSort earlier, you should already have plugged into your game launcher, so you won't need the standalone mod version. If you're not using RimSort, this is still well worth grabbing to make sure you're always using the best versions of your mods, with it suggesting the most supported, updated or stable version and handling the unsubscribe and resubscribe process for you with just a click of a button. Now we move on to UI and hotbar mods. These are things that change your menus, character panels or tools within the game. Save storage, outfit, crafting, drug and operation settings is a hell of a mouthful for a mod, but it allows you to create saved lists that you can simply insert into another colony later. This helps getting the early game set up that much quicker. Especially useful on things like drug policies or basic crafting builds that you use in practically every colony you play. Allow tool is still one of the most powerful mods that you can get your hands on, adding some new functionality to your kit such as finishing off downed enemies, but also giving you access to mine out entire veins of ore and see beforehand what that actually entails, rather than the included 1.6 functionality that marks the ore as it goes. I've done a video on Allow tool in the past because it's more powerful than a lot of players realise, mainly thanks to the right-click functionality on a lot of your tools. If you're going to use Allow tool, you probably want to pair it with more orders too, giving you additional options like yanking skulls, opening boxes and digging up saplings. Even if you don't use Allow tool, you still want more orders, because it's extremely helpful with looting the platforms included in the Odyssey DLC. The next two mods are intended to work in tandem, as Better Architect Menu needs Architect icons to function. The Better Menu mod will change the structure of your Architect menu and stop it spilling all over the screen in the late game when you have multiple structures unlocked per section. Instead, it breaks it down within sub-menus that can be scrolled through and even customized to your liking. This mod is kept pretty well updated too, so chances are if you have new modded content that adds something buildable to the game, it should be automatically moved into a section that makes sense. If you happen to install something that isn't supported, you're able to put it in the category yourself and organise it as you see fit. Capitalised work types is something else that's entirely down to personal preference, but I like my work menu to have its writing capitalised rather than all lowercase. I know people hate capitalism these days, but that's not what it means. CM colour-coded mood bar gives you a few more options than the standard colonist bar on the top of your screen, allowing you to show things like gender, bleeding, illness, pregnancy, and also making moods more visible by using colour coding instead of the base game background bar height. Dubs Mint Menus does a lot of things, but the one that I often notice people mentioning in my videos comments is what gave you the nice menu for plants. That's Dubs. If any of the menus I've opened in this video look appealing to you, chances are it's because Dubs Mint Menus is responsible for changing them. Fahrenheit and Celsius is something I've started using more when making rundown videos, as it covers the information for both the civilized world that use Celsius and everyone else who decided that they need to remember 32 is the freezing point and 212 is boiling. It's much easier than 0 and 100. Quality colours will make it easy at a glance to know how good a piece of gear is. It's fairly customisable too. So if you're not a fan of the WoW colour grading that I use, you can modify it to suit your own preference. Random's Gene Assistant isn't something that you're going to use every run, but if you have a Gene Lab operational, it makes it extremely easy at a glance to see what you do and don't have in storage, as well as highlighting genes you do own that are linked in a multipack. It makes it so much easier to know if a certain xenotype is beneficial to perform extractions on or not, preventing you from filling up your gene storage with needless duplicates. Work tab is a pretty involved mod, but even on the most basic level it gives you more flexibility with work assignments. Rather than using the base game's yes, no or 1 to 4 scaling, this allows you to go from 1 to 9. And you can open out the broader work tasks to manage their individual priorities, if you want. It allows you to do things like increase the priority of planting new crops over harvesting them, which means that when it comes time to harvest, they cut one, plant a new one, and then move on, rather than depleting the entire field and then leaving it barren for a full day without actually getting any grow time. Or you could do something like use someone's cooking skill but only assign them to butchery jobs. The more time you spend fiddling with the settings in Work tab, the more comfortable you're going to be with it. Don't be afraid to try out its more involved features if you feel like you're constantly having to force jobs across your colony. Chances are you can automate those things with some smart priority settings. RimHood is what I use that gives me the more detailed information screen in the bottom left when I'm selecting a colonist. This is quite a lot busier than the vanilla panel, but it saves you needing to dig through a whole bunch of menus at times and provides a very quick overview of the most important stats and settings. RPG style inventory revamped is another mod that I'll frequently get asked about. It's also very customizable too. This gives you a more traditional paper doll style of equipment screen for your colonists rather than the vanilla list, making it easy to see what slots they still have free, as well as things like item quality and remaining durability. Research Tree is also here to give you a single page of tech rather than needing to jump across tabs when you start adding in multiple mods that all come with their own projects. If you're keeping your mod list trimmed down right now, this one might be a bit overkill. If you plan on adding in some more content heavy stuff, this is great to tie everything together and give you a more clear path to the tech that you actually want. Now we're going to do some mods that are extremely subjective. Visuals. I typically lean towards mods that fit with the vanilla style, so my visual options tend to reflect that. Nothing here goes overboard or attempts to make the game look anything other than Rimworld. I just find it more aesthetically pleasing. Blood animations will up the brutality of your combat. Larger splatters with machine guns absolutely painting the ground behind an enemy raider. Coloured deep resources is a very small tweak that makes it easier at a glance to find what you're looking for when using a ground penetrating scanner, better defining underground resource deposits with a customizable colour. Graphic Chair Overhaul 2 makes it so that things like armchairs and dining chairs actually render over a colonist that's using it, rather than having your pawns floating over any north-facing furniture. No Overhead Meal does a similar thing to the Chair Overhaul, making it so that any colonists that are eating a meal that should be covering it are now rendered on the correct layer, hiding the meal that's placed in front of them. Show Me Your Hands only needs to do a very small thing, and it makes a massive difference in visuals. Giving all the humanoids tiny hands to hold their weapons and gear rather than having equipment awkwardly float in front of them is awesome. Simple blinking animation is my go-to rather than a full suite like Yayo's animation or facial animation. I like pawns to stay in place on their tile as much as possible, but even something as small as having them blink and close their eyes when they go to sleep adds for a great level of expression when you're watching your colony work. Clean textures can be another Marmite mod. Some may find it too bright or colourful if you're after a more gritty Rimworld experience. This replaces the large patches of brown soil with a more lush, grassy texture, as well as smoothing stone and making rocky soil look closer to its name. More recently, it even improves the look of things like craters included with Odyssey, and cranks the unique visuals of places like Glow Forest to 11. No mod list on loading is a tiny mod that might not even really be visual, but it's not really UI either as you don't interact with it. It simply removes the pointless mod list that shows up when you are loading your save game, because that's doing nothing but hiding the splash screen behind it without providing any relevant information, because once you've got more than 10 mods installed, you can't check through it anyway. Now we're on to content mods. These are things that will add new buildables, structures, research projects, but for my core mod list, I keep these extremely trimmed. If it doesn't make sense for basically every colony, it doesn't make the cut. We'll start with the smaller additions to this section first. SBZ Fridge gives you storage options that will keep your items fresh, perfect for raw food or meals. The downside to benefiting from this refrigeration effect is that it has a lowered max item capacity, so it stores less stacks than a standard shelf, as well as being more expensive to build and requiring power to function. But if you don't want to build walk-in freezers everywhere, this is a great alternative. SBZ Neat Storage makes for more interesting and varied storage options than the base game shelf, allowing you to hang clothes, display weapons, hook corpses, or stack materials on pallets. The flexibility to make your storerooms look more specialised and focused helps in moving away from having every colony end up with a big square room that's just stuffed with basic shelving. You can even build display cases to showcase beautiful items. SBZ Grav Ship Storage is Odyssey specific. This gives you racks, shelves and crates that will match the aesthetic of your ship far better than standard shelving, looking like they're actually capable of preventing items from going flying when you take a rough landing. LWM's Adaptive Deep Storage gives you even more options for storage solutions. Rather than using the standard version of deep storage, this makes use of the adaptive framework that SBZ's mods are also using. This will give you things like skips, meal racks, weapon lockers and medicine cabinets, so you have a few more options if you would like to lock your gear away from view rather than having it sat openly on a shelf or stored in a rack. You don't need to use all of these together by any means. I personally like having the options for visual variety. Mend and Recycle is a mod that will be bordering on cheating for some players. It allows you to break down gear that you don't need for a very small material refund, as well as allowing you to repair the gear that you do want to keep and bring it back to tip-top condition. It's a pretty customizable mod, so you can determine how likely the process is to succeed or fail, as well as deciding if it has a cost requirement in the form of mending kits and power consumption. These mending kits that are consumed when fixing your gear are going to need steel and cloth to create. Prison Commons will let you flag rooms as a common area for prisoners, so if they're connected to cells, prisoners are allowed to roam that room and use the structures within it. This allows you to set up a basic mess hall with a meal source for them and create a more appealing environment, which helps keep them happier and avoids mental breaks. Just be aware that building recreation structures inside a prison is wasted, as they do not have that need. Trading Control is used to better manage your caravans and orbitals. It lets you tell them where to gather or fling your goods via some simple spots, and you also get the option to build a marketplace that will slowly accumulate a trade buff for any colonists that are nearby it, meaning that if you place it close to where your caravans chill out, you can spend some time mingling with them and you'll have better prices when it comes time to seal the deal. Ultimate Storyteller is an odd one to include here, but it's the section that makes the most sense. If you find that Cassandra can be too slow or predictable, but Randy is too high variance, this brings them together to ensure that you have the best of both worlds. You get all of the random triggers of Randy Random, whilst ensuring that you don't go too long only receiving good or non-aggressive events. So you'll still be facing a reliable stream of raids without it working like such a metronome. Vanilla Backstories Expanded adds to colonist backstories in a very non-intrusive way. You'll find that you have more diversity in colonist incapabilities and passions due to the greater variety of backstories that they can now generate with. Vanilla Traits Expanded works in a very similar way, making for more interesting colonist generation. The best part of this is if there's any traits that you absolutely despise, like Rebel or Submissive, you can turn them off individually with the mod options. This even extends to turning off base game traits too. Onto the larger content mods that have secured their place in my core mod list. For as many mods as I absolutely adore, there are very few that I would keep enabled across every single game. So you can consider it a pretty solid endorsement for the quality of everything that's been included here. Starting with Alpha Memes and Vanilla Ideology Expanded, Memes and Structures. These are, in my opinion, a necessity if you're going to play with the Ideology DLC. When you think of what you want to do with an ideologian in the game and the type of colony that you want to make, this combo of mods will make anything possible. For as much love as Ideology gets, the DLC is very bare bones in its vanilla state. This pairing does a phenomenal job of building out on its concept whilst keeping it within that vanilla aesthetic and function. Geological landforms has been included in a limited form with the base game now, but the mod itself still justifies its inclusion by massively building upon the types of map that you can generate and the interesting opportunities that they present. Whilst you might not vibe with all of the map types included, they may not fit with your personal playstyle, it feels fairly safe to say that there is something here for everyone. From unique mountainscapes to beautiful coastlines, your building possibilities are near endless. Regrowth 2 and Regrowth Aspen are just a solid addition to make your world beautiful. It's going to overhaul the world map to better visualize the terrain thanks to the world map beautification project, as well as increasing plant density and variety, creating a gorgeous place to settle. The Aspen biome is very fitting with vanilla biomes, blending seamlessly into the game and giving you the option to settle on a more autumnal tile with warm yellows and oranges over summer, but bitingly cold winters. Resplice Core is going to need biotech, and it focuses on making the Xenogerm editing system more viable, with a few new parts to help in storing your library of genes, as well as extra utility for managing gene packs, and help in splitting out the parts that you actually want. Much like the grav ship storage mentioned in the previous part, even if I don't make use of this on every run, it's lightweight enough and unintrusive that keeping this enabled is not a detriment. Then when I do want to use it, it's right there and ready to go. Vanilla Furniture Expanded is a very easy inclusion. You get more tiers of furniture, better variety for your bases, and a perfect aesthetic match for base game. It makes every colony more interesting to build and theme, as well as greatly expanding on your options for recreation, something sorely lacking in base game. Rebuild Doors and Corners falls into the same reasoning as Furniture Expanded, with a few additional graphical tweaks like perspective doors and functionality mods like door clearance. You're also getting greater options rather than just using standard walls, with functioning glass that can naturally light rooms and cheaper alternatives to throw up an easy crap shack. You're also going to be getting really basic additions like larger doors for wider corridors and a greater variety of flooring options. Vanilla Plants Expanded is useful to have if you're settling on biomes that aren't always temperate forest with year-round growing, giving you multiple new crops that will thrive in different weather conditions or temperatures, as well as cabbages that resist toxic fallout or blight-resistant onions. I don't feel the need to go out with all of the extra plant mods here. The base Plants Expanded is enough for the core pack. Vanilla Chem Fuel Expanded builds on a mechanic that's more important with the release of Odyssey, providing super helpful pipes and production to work with using your existing chem fuel supplies, as well as additional refinery options. I prefer QoL Expanded over Rimfella, but both mods could work in this place. I just find Expanded has greater interconnectivity with the other VE mods I've included here. Vanilla Nutrient Paste Expanded and the Pellets add-on for it may be a strange one to include as a core mod, because not every colony is going to make liberal use of paste, but I find it extremely useful for prisoners, crash landed starts, and with the Pellets add-on, taking care of your livestock. It's lightweight enough that it doesn't get in the way if you choose to forego paste for a colony or two, but it's infinitely easier to use than a standard paste dispenser when you do want to make use of it, allowing you to pipe it to different rooms entirely and saving you needing to build another freezer behind the paste dispenser to keep the raw food in the hoppers fresh. From content mods, now we move into tweaks. These will change how mechanics or systems work within the game without adding a great deal of their own content. This is less automation focused than the quality of life changes and more focused on changing gameplay overall. Frozen Snow Fox Better Exploration loot will enhance the equipment and parts that you find from ruins, making it actually worthwhile to travel to those world sites. The loot is now more on par with something like an Ancient Danger instead of a random pile of leather or raw food. Beautiful Outdoors will tweak the values on all of your outdoor plants and surfaces, meaning that colonists actually enjoy going for a walk through nature rather than complaining that there's soil underneath their feet. A very lightweight mod that has a big impact on keeping your colonists' beauty values topped up if they're working outdoors. Better Distress Signal is an anomaly specific, increasing the variety of factions that can call for help with an anomaly threat in the world and also incentivizing you to arrive quickly to help them, as making it to the site in under 12 hours results in the residents still being alive. It also increases the variety of threats you can face when responding to these calls, making it far more interesting to fight against different anomalous beasties. Better Ground Penetrating Scanner is going to buff the base game scanner by allowing it to work passively at a reduced speed, as well as letting you focus on a specific type of resource when scanning if you'd like to, meaning no more pain when you reveal 5 deposits of jade back to back when all you really want is some steel. Better map sizes will let you manually input your own map size when you generate your tile. So if you ever wanted to play on something absolutely tiny, massive, or even an unusual shape, such as a rectangle rather than a square, this will let you do it. Corpse Description Fix is a very simple tweak that makes it so that the target's values, shown when it's alive, will still be present on the corpse information page too. Death Acid Fest causes enemies that have a death acidifier installed to instantly become a skeletal corpse upon death, rather than it somehow destroying their gear but leaving their body intact. It's not great if you're a cannibal, but it makes far more sense logistically. Fists Aren't Made of Steel will drastically lower the damage of an unarmed attack against a structure, meaning prisoners can't just batter down the doors and walls of your base in mere seconds when they stage a breakout. It doesn't make wood indestructible by any means, but sturdy materials will now pose a significant roadblock for anyone willing to break every bone in their hand to try battering it down. Floors Are Absolutely Worthless will allow you to decorate your base with more beautiful flooring without being punished for it. Floors contribute a staggering amount of colony wealth and as a result of that, pump up the enemy raid values. Given that enemies aren't turning up to steal your carpets or sterile tiles, it makes sense that you shouldn't be so heavily punished for actually using nice floors. Healer Mech Serum choice removes the priority system on the Healer Mech Serum and instead puts that decision in your hands. No more raging over it removing toxic buildup when you wanted it to restore a missing lung. Just put it over there will have traders from caravans actually care about what they're selling to you, aiming to carry it to a stockpile rather than just tossing it on the floor when a trade's complete. A very important note with this mod though, if you use vanilla traits expanded alongside it, absent-minded caravanners can forget what they're doing mid-delivery and pocket your goods instead. To avoid this, either disable the trait or check the caravans before you commit to a shopping spree. Kidnapped Pawns Die Less fixes the 10 speed on pawns where they're off map, which is by default 1 injury tended every 3 hours. Now they'll bandage a wound every 20 minutes, making it far less likely that any kidnapped colonists will bleed out, and it increases the chances that you'll see them reappear as a rescue mission later, or as an enemy raider that's been brainwashed. Morph's assorted no crushed bodies is still included, even with all of those mods that improve the building logic, because sometimes colonists will just get splattered by falling rocks. This allows you to excavate the crushed bodies out from beneath the fallen rubble, meaning you can use a resurrection serum to bring them back still, rather than having them be completely deleted when a heavy ceiling collapses. Move Your Monolith is a very simple tweak, but it's undeniably pretty powerful. This allows you to minify and relocate the monolith on your map if you're playing with Anomaly, allowing you to design a site of worship around it or to remove the flooring that's beneath it. No job authors is a big change for how simple the concept is, allowing your workers to pick up any project and continue work on it, with the quality being determined by the colonist that finishes the final touch. You can go really min-max with this if you want to, have unskilled crafters hand over their project to the higher skilled colonist and improve the gear quality, but I find it more useful in stopping your storeroom simply being flooded with half-finished items, as everyone can now contribute to everything. Not My Fault is going to save you a serious amount of relationship penalties over the course of a colony lifespan. If the injury wasn't directly caused by you, it no longer lowers relations, so animals going manhunter or a raid showing up when a caravan's present isn't going to absolutely tank your reputation. Pawn Target Fix is going to rejigger the targeting priority of ranged combatants, making them prioritise enemies closest to them first, rather than the random scattershot of vanilla. This helps significantly in stopping that odd raider or two slipping through the kill zone and making it to your melee line. Quality Builder will allow you to set the minimum acceptable quality for a structure to be constructed at. If it fails to reach it, it'll be set for deconstruction and they'll try again. Extremely useful to make all your furniture in the early game at least normal quality, so it doesn't come with penalties to any of its stats. And for the later game, you can up that default quality so it aims for good, excellent, or even masterwork. Aiming for legendary might be a bit ambitious though. Stop, Drop and Roll is undoubtedly unbalanced. It prevents them from running around like a headless chicken when they're on fire and instead makes them take the time to actually try and pat the fire out. Also makes it far easier for any of your nearby colonists to assist them in removing the flames too. If you ever had an imp land one good flame breath on your entire colony, you understand how devastating that can be for your run. Ugh, You Got Me will help by stopping social fights before they become deadly. If a limb falls below a certain damage threshold and risks being destroyed by the next potential attack, they accept defeat and call the fight rather than carrying on and risk losing their arm, leg, or even head. This still won't stop things like a finger, toe, nose, or even eye being destroyed, as they can be crushed in one good hit. But in the case of damage like that being sustained, they also immediately stop the fight and go and seek medical treatment, as well as rethinking their life choices. Ugly Together is going to stop disfigured or ugly characters judging others based on their appearance. As such, wasters will generally get along better with one another, as they understand the difficulty of living with a face that looks like a dropped lasagna. Useful Terror fixes how the terror system from Ideology operates, so slaves will remember seeing a terror object for a few hours rather than needing to be within radius of it for its effect to work. As long as you keep some terrifying objects built along common walkways for your slaves, they should stay much more suppressed throughout the day. Vanilla Fix, Haul After Slaughter, will ensure that your hunters aren't just going out murdering animals and leaving them to rot, instead ensuring that they're made to haul the target back to your stockpile once the slaughter has been successfully completed. The last part of the core mod pack are large tweaks. These hit more interactions or have greater mechanical changes than the previous category, and some of them need more input from you as a player to function as you would like, with numerous settings and options. Common Sense adds in a variety of small logic tweaks that will change the workflow of your colony, helping to keep it cleaner and have everything run just a little bit smoother. Chefs won't start cooking in a filthy kitchen, doctors won't operate in a dirty hospital, bored colonists won't go for a walk or stargaze if it's pissing it down with rain outside. It just helps to avoid negative moodlets and bad outcomes. Ogre Stack is something I love, but like a couple of others in this pack, it's a Marmite mod. I don't find building massive storerooms that interesting or that great of a challenge, so I go the route of using Ogre Stack to increase the amount of items held per stack, leading to shelves being capable of storing more items overall. Of course, the downside to this is that a single shelf burning now risks destroying significantly more of your resources. Swings and roundabouts. This is a really customizable mod that comes with multiple presets for how significantly it's going to impact stack size. I just use low settings and that's all I've ever needed. Pick up and haul is going to help by reminding your colonists they have pockets. Rather than picking up a single item or type of item at a time and hauling it one by one, your colonists will now hoover up stacks of things and use their inventory capacity to haul instead. Just be aware that if you draft a colonist whilst you're using this mod and they're hauling, they're then going to be running around with all of those resources on their person. Biome transitions is listed here rather than as a visual change because it has mechanical considerations too. Landing in a desert or an ice plain isn't going to be as tricky if you border it with a biome that grants you access to the raw materials you'd normally be limited on. Outside of that, it just makes for far more interesting tiles when it's not quite so monotone, allowing for a gentle merging across the borders between any surrounding biomes. Dub's Break mod is going to redesign how mental breaks work, which is no small thing. For more extreme breaks to be triggered, an equally extreme moodlet needs to be present. Someone isn't going to go on a murderous rampage over multiple small problems anymore. They will still break and spend time wandering or maybe even start a social fight, but you'll find that significant break spirals will start far less frequently when you're using this mod. Some Things Float will add mechanics to water in your game with a great degree of customization. At the most basic level, it allows for objects or bodies that would float on water to be carried by its current, even so far as to going off map for things like rivers or oceans. Creatures that are downed in deep water now also run the risk of drowning. And not only that, you can toggle a setting that has a chance for creatures crossing water to lose their footing and fall into it. Personally, I keep that setting off, as well as removing the item spawning stuff that can see random objects occasionally float onto your tile. It's just a really nice mod to make the water in your game more realistic and offer up a fantastic corpse disposal option too. Optimization Meats C# is a godsend if you're tired of having multiple small stacks of meat that all behave exactly the same. There is zero in-game difference outside of the name between muffalo meat and pork. The same amount is used when cooking, it's got the same nutritional value, taste isn't a consideration. This mod will turn all relevant meat types into just meat, so it can stack in a single pile and remove the need to scroll through dozens of ingredients in your list when cooking. If a meat does have a unique interaction, like toxic, human, or twisted, it'll remain unchanged so it still functions correctly. Performance Optimizer is going to alter some of the check rates across your game to try and ease up some of the pressure on the tick rate. None of these things are being altered by such a massive amount that you're going to notice any real downside in game either. It's things like how often plants check against changing their colours if they're in the fall season, but all of these bits come together to give you a nice little boost on your in-game performance. Tweaks Galore and Frozen Snow Fox tweaks have a few overlaps, but both are included here with the same idea. They're massive suites of customization options and preferential tweaks that you can use on a more personal basis. Both of these mods need you to look through them first and see what they're doing. What I use this mod for is going to be drastically different to what you use it for, Personally, I like the options for things like stackable chunks, which needs to be set to the same value on both of these mods. I disable the lethal damage threshold, I enable buildable packed dirt, no randomly generated relations on raids, hidden electrical wires, lag-free torch lamps, alerts for orbital traders, better utility layers, default white lights, filth vanishing with rain and time, harder environmental effects, metal doesn't burn, young people and growable pasture grass, just to name a few. These mods are huge. If you've got through this video so far and thought, oh, why doesn't he include X mod in this list? Chances are it's because Tweaks Galore or Frozen Snowfox Tweaks includes it in theirs. I'd rather have 2 large tweak mods that can do almost everything, rather than needing to keep track of 50 different mods that are only doing little bits here or there. It's so much easier to keep stuff updated and playing nicely together that way. Now we're into the stuff that isn't in my core list but comes heavily recommended. We're starting with what I'm calling content heavy additions. This is stuff I love but don't have enabled all of the time because it adds so much to the game that may not always be necessary. First and foremost, my love, Combat Extended, with a mention for the Armory Edition that I normally run alongside it, and if you want to be a masochist, there's armors, attachments, guns and melee, which personally I think are overkill. CE is a very difficult mod to recommend as part of any core pack, because it changes such an insane amount of mechanics and completely overhauls damage and armor. You even have to take into account considerations for other mods that I mentioned to my core pack, like if you set Boomalopes to bleed chem fuel in one of the Tweaks mods, they constantly start fires if you have CE enabled. One of the biggest rundowns that I've done is on CE, how it works, what it changes, why I came to love it, but I entirely get if it's not your jam. So with that in mind, if you want more content that focuses on combat without such a big mechanical overhaul, I recommend instead using Vanilla Armor Expanded, Vanilla Weapons Expanded, and Vanilla Furniture Expanded Security. With that recommendation coming with the caveat that I don't recommend using the VE mods alongside CE. If you're going to use CE, stick with what it offers. Equally, if I'm playing with vanilla combat mechanics, I just use Vanilla Expanded to bulk out my options. These are very fitting in terms of scaling, costing, and impact when compared to base game choices. So unlike some of the other gear mods out there, they won't render all of your other options meaningless. They're just a solid chunk of choices to build out your armory potential. Vanilla Apparel Expanded, however, is something I would use with either CE or VE, as all of the clothing options work fantastically with both choices, adding more variety to the look of your colonists and giving you greater creative control over how you dress in certain biomes, rather than always landing on dusters or parkas, depending on if it's hot or cold. Det's Battle Meds will help expand out your tend options for mid-combat, rather than having every medical procedure be something that's done after the fact. It's on the small side in terms of the mods mentioned so far, as it only adds 4 new items, but they can become incredibly potent in keeping your combatants alive and in one piece. The reason it falls here is that it can snowball quite hard, and result in actual medical treatment becoming trivialized towards the late game. So building a fancy hospital doesn't feel great when it doesn't really see that much use. If you're running a combat heavy playthrough though, throw this on, otherwise might be overkill. Dub's Bad Hygiene and Vanilla Temperature Expanded have a lot of overlap, but I love both of them. If you use them both and add in progression temperature, it'll do a great job of condensing that overlap right down so that you don't end up with multiple versions of the same thing. Dubs does a great job of adding a chunk of extra mechanical depth to your colony, needing you to manage bladder and hygiene with toilets and showers, whilst both offer a great variety of options for things like air conditioning, radiators, and all the piping systems that go with it. It's one of the less combat-oriented mods mentioned so far, so if you find that you run out of things to manage when you're building your base and everything seems a bit too straightforward to throw down and then forget about, adding these mods in provides a great additional challenge and consideration for your base building. Integrated implants is a huge suite of options for prosthetics, enhancements, all kinds of stuff you can install on your colonists. Probably one of the best on the workshop in terms of its balance and implementation. If you're going for a futuristic transhuman colony of bionically infused super soldiers, this is perfect for that. It's not in my core list simply because it's massive. It's a hell of a lot of parts to add to your game if you aren't going to make use of them in the current playthrough. For a bunch of vanilla expanded editions to go through here, we have animals, brewing, cooking, factions, gravship, the furniture spacer module, and races. All fantastic in their own right, but just like integrated implants, if you aren't actively making use of these additions, it's a hell of a lot of stuff to have running in the background. Animals are great if you plan on ranching or are looking for some visual, if not mechanical, variety to your wildlife. Brewing and cooking will expand the utility of your cooking skill dramatically, giving you a whole new host of processes and substances to use in your colony. But if you're only going to make a standard stove and eat the base game meals, or stick to paste, it's quite a lot of clutter to the menus and research tree that you're constantly ignoring or scrolling through. Gravship is somewhat similar. If you're not planning on flying around with the current colony, you've no reason to have all of those extra parts and projects in the background. If you find that you make liberal use of gravships, however, this could easily become a core mod for you. And if you're going to make use of the gravship mod, you might as well include the spacer furniture module as well, as it puts in a multitude of parts that pair beautifully with it and help to accentuate your gravship and make it more interesting when building. Now, despite what some people think, faction mods are not intended to all be used at the same time. The idea is you pick and choose what works thematically on a run-by-run basis and include them when it's relevant. Obviously what you consider relevant is down to you, but there are a hell of a lot of content to have active all of the time, with numerous mechanics and interactions that are all vying for your attention. If you find a lot of your playthroughs end up with you always picking the same thing because it's the most accessible and the most bang for your buck, the Rimworld equivalent of the Skyrim Stealth Archer problem, you can try and remedy it by cutting down how many of these large faction mods you're using to encourage yourself to try other things, or simply cut out the stuff that you're clearly not interacting with anyway. It's somewhat the same with race mods, although to a lesser degree, as variety in xenotypes can be more immediately noticeable as it's impacting all the raiders and events you're seeing happen on each playthrough. Of course, if you're not planning on running an android colony or turning people into sanguiphages, ask yourself if you really need all of those mods active all the time, as again, it's a hell of a lot of parts and structures to load every time you start the game, just for them to sit there completely inactive, twiddling their thumbs. Then we've got some more case-by-case mods to finish this out. These come recommended, but they are likely going to appeal to a more niche audience, in my opinion. Cherry Picker is great if you like part of a mod, but don't necessarily want to use all of it. It allows you to turn off structures or components and conditions as needed. It's fairly bulletproof in how it works. I've rarely seen issues with turning off parts causing any issues, but just be aware that even though you're disabling parts of a mod, it still has to load them all when you launch the game, so this isn't going to shorten the length of your coffee break between hitting play and having that main menu appear. Colony Manager Redux is a great automation mod for basic tasks like hunting, harvesting wood, gathering wild plants. If you want to use it, you're going to need to install Alevion's lab framework to go with it. Whilst it can be great for letting you focus on much larger tasks, as it handles all your mundane jobs, it does have a noticeable impact on game performance. It's unavoidable. If you value your enjoyment of the game over its tick rate, and cutting out the boring jobs is going to help with that, it could be fantastic for you. Ignorance is Bliss is great if you want to play as a low-tech faction, as it makes no sense to have spacer tier enemies knocking down your door for your stockpile of pemmican and wood. The only issue is that your runs can feel very samey if you use Ignorance is Bliss all the time. You frequently see the same enemies that fall within your allowed range, and you rarely get to see a more serious threat like mechanoids. Awesome if you're running a tech-locked game though. Pawn Editor is the option of choice at the minute if you want to tweak the stats and customize your colonists. I know there are a lot of people that are still somehow using Prepare Carefully despite all the issues around it. Yes, Prepare Carefully is easier to use, and yes, I'm sure you haven't had it break your game yet, but it always inevitably does, because it doesn't play nice with a lot of other mods. If you're going to tweak your colonists, do yourself a favour and swap over to Pawn Editor. Losing a save that you've had running for a couple of weeks because of the grey screen bug absolutely sucks, and once Prepare Carefully has dug its fingers into your save, yanking it out doesn't change that. The damage is done. Get rid of it, install Pawn Editor, save yourself a headache down the line. Quarry is a mod that some colonies will really benefit from, especially in a mountain deprived tile before you've got ground penetrating scanners and deep drills. Once you have those techs, it's overshadowed by them, but you might find it useful in a tech locked run, but just not necessarily on every playthrough. Semi-random research is an extremely cool concept, but depending on what you're intending to do with your colony, it can really shut down your run. If you're playing a little more fast and loose with how you unlock your tech and are happy with taking what's offered and just adding things as they show up, it's a blast. But when all of your weaponry upgrades are locked behind a single tech and it hasn't shown up in the last 6 or 7 rolls, it gets real sigh-inducing. Of course, it does have settings that let you get around that, but at that point you might as well just be picking the research that you wanted anyway. Scattered Flames, Simple FX, Smoke and Splashes are really nice visual mods if you're not going to use Regrowth 2, as a version of these is included with it as standard. So if Regrowth 2 was a little bit too big for your tastes, but you still want some nice visuals, using this trio is a solid go-to. Just be aware that the large fires will absolutely tank your tick rate when using these mods, because of all the extra considerations the game's having to make. Vanilla Psycast Expanded can't go without a mention here. It's the first mod that I covered that really got a lot of eyes on the channel. Much like Gravship Expanded, if you're not planning on using Psycasts, having all this stuff floating in the background is pointless. You only really want it active if you're planning to make use of it. Unlike Gravship Expanded, however, I still take issue with the balance of Psycast Expanded. It is so easy to trivialise the game with just a few good Psycasters, and the run rapidly becomes dull as nothing is a challenge to you anymore. That's why it lands in this section instead. It's really fun to mess around with, and each ability is super unique and cool to try out, but if you're not careful, every colony ends up being the same thing with a different name, and you'll fall back on the same Psycasts all the time. Use it at your own discretion, but don't be surprised if this makes the rest of the game feel boring in comparison to what it's giving you. Vanilla Skills Expanded is a little bit different. I find that the expertise can swing so wildly in its utility and power from one colony to the next. In something heavily focused on combat, having everyone pick a proficiency with ranged or melee will make a handful of colonists unkillable murder machines that shrug off everything but the strongest raid. Whereas if you use it for a group of survivors looking to trade or working towards a more charitable goal, increasing their negotiation skills and plant yield can be impactful, but it's not game breaking. That's why it lands on the content heavy side of things that I love but don't make use of all the time. It could really do with a tuning pass or two to bring it in line with more recent VE mods. And there we have it, the 1.6 core mod list, as well as extra recommendations to bulk out your Rimworld experience and add easily another 1000 hours or so of playtime to your Steam stats. If there's a mod you love and it wasn't featured here, it doesn't mean I don't like it or I haven't seen it. This list is cultivated primarily around accessibility, visual cohesion and utility. The most bang for your buck without pulling away from the core experience. Just to reiterate, if you're going to use the expanded list, it is not designed to all be turned on at once. You're supposed to pick and choose the options from it based on what I've said here. CE will play nicely with most things these days, but that doesn't mean it works perfectly with everything. So if you're going to go that route, make sure you're aware that you will need to prune your mod list more than you're used to. Otherwise you'll get some really funky shenanigans and weird interactions from time to time. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm off to make some coverage for the new factory mod by the VE team. Likely something that would end up in the heavily recommended content section of this video. If you want to see what I'm working on and get any insights into upcoming projects, it's all on my Patreon page. All the posts there are totally free to read, but if you would like, you can support me in producing content for just £1 a month. It gets your name in the credits of these videos and it helps me to stay alive. Wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon or evening. Stay safe and take care.
Always watching over me, somehow you make me feel invisible. Power to my soul, yeah. How easy things that used to bother me, cause your existence just lights me